let's see, do a quick roll. And we've got everybody but, okay, I'm Brian Boyce, present.
Richard Craven.
Dead behind.
Pete Walter.
Jerry Herman.
Bob Roth.
There should be a little light on top of the ship if it's on.
What's the one? Okay.
And we'll mention our audience members as well. We've got
Paul Edgar from the Kanema Neighborhood Association.
Jim Nasita, McLaughlin resident.
Thanks.
Okay, we have two members of the public wanting to make comment on this, so I think we'll go ahead and do that.
I'd like to make okay. I'm Paul Edgar. I'm here for an informational request to try to inform some people.
Can we hold on just a second? Just a point of order. We're here to talk about the ordinance tonight, not that. So
I would like to have a moment, just 3 minutes, to explain something I would hope you could take a look at and do research on, and then come back to for you. And I just want to give you an overview and get out of here on Kanema.
sounds great.
It's for me. Yeah. Are you okay?
Yeah.
I'm good. Yep.
Kanema has an area right next to Old Kanema Park and right on Coffee Creek, coming right off of Fifth Avenue. And this is a wetlands and creek area, and adjacent to this, and it's critical for connecting trails through out of Old Kanema Park if we ever want to create a trail network. But more critical is that this property is now being considered to be sold and developed, and it was platted in 1865, and it has 10 50 by 100 building lots on it. And even though water and steep slopes and sliding, it's right in a slide zone, there are still legal rights of those lots platted in 1865. The critical nature of this is, I would love to have people take a look at that, because the city, in my mind, would be the ideal entity to buy that land or to get part of it donated to them and to protect it from, because it's an environmental gem. Right now it's a showcase, and it's never been soiled. It's got some really great potential for show and tell. It's got an exposed Coffee Creek right on it. And it's my hope that you guys would come into Kanema, right off of South End Road on Fifth Avenue, and you'll see a sign on a tree, property for sale. And you could see a trail that goes right down into it here. And that trail or driveway would be the exact trail that we could take right out of the city and connect right up into Kanema, through Kanema and up to the hillside. So the key is, I just want you to come and take a look at it. You can see it right off of Fifth Avenue on South End Road, and if you do then I'd love to come back and explain why this is worth protecting and what the environmental harm that would result by just letting it go to hell, be developed, when to me, logically, there's no reason for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And we have one other, you're speaking on the subject at hand, I
I
believe.
am actually speaking, yes, directly to the topic at hand. Okay, thank you, Chair. I may ask your indulgence for a little bit extra time, Chair Boyce, but I'll try to make my comments really, really quick. First comment is, I raised this with Commissioner Herman, but I wanted to share this with you in response to the mayor's comments regarding the legislative intent of the ordinance at your last meetings. I did some research on the prior version of this code, and I'll pass it around. There are two interesting things about it. Section 12.08050 is the heritage trees ordinance in the former chapter 12.08, and it's only a paragraph. It's only one section. And it was only on trees, so the 2009 revisions added groves. So I think the fact that there wasn't groves before but are now is an expression of legislative intent to expand it to include groves like we are proposing for Waterboard Park. Fascinatingly, when I looked this up, I want to direct your attention to this really interesting, in the definitions on the first page, this kind of relic ordinance. It's a definition on something called a community forest. Community forest means an area of native trees and other vegetation at least 5 acres in size in public ownership inside the city or urban growth area that provides significant ecological, historical, or aesthetic values to the citizens of the city. I'm pretty fascinated by that, especially because there's nothing in the remainder of the ordinance that discusses community forests at all. So in earlier versions of the code, I'm wondering if there was a whole section on community forests that at some point got removed. I couldn't find, this was in the binder in the law library. I went to the law library and then to our library up here. And finally, I tried to go on, we have this function on the website. It's a records online function where you can go back and get old ordinances, but I couldn't make it work on 3 computers. So I just leave that for you. The old code sections are there, and if you want to review that and see if community forests might be a 3rd level of what's under consideration now, I'll leave that up to all of you. But it's kind of interesting.
What was the date on this?
This is from 2005. Yeah, and it was up until the code got changed in July of 2009. And our current ordinance dates from that it was a massive revision of the whole city ordinance.
2005 is when we were being asked to review all parts of the comp plan. We were, as a, he and I were members of that committee at that. Yeah. Right.
Second thing, I only have one comment on the current text, and I think it's really good, and I have to really commend Pete for hanging in there with all of these changes, and it's taken a long time, and I think it's all the time and patience has resulted in a good product. The only change that I'd offer for consideration by the committee is adding a section that treats groves and trees that have already been approved. Since you're changing the ordinance, I think you might want to make clear that it doesn't affect prior adoptions, the fact that the ordinance has been changed. And I don't think that's in the current version. Third and final thing, I want to just give you all an update on what happened with the Heritage Grove application for Waterboard Park. We went to City Commission last week and pointed out that the current version of the ordinance requires the City Commission actually review an application at a regularly scheduled City Commission meeting and take a vote at that meeting. And that hadn't been done when the City Commission reviewed the application back in July of 2012. City Commission voted 5-0, therefore, to schedule an actual hearing on the application at the next City Commission meeting, which will be coming next week, this Wednesday the 12th. So I just wanted to alert you to that hearing on the 12th, if any of you are interested in being there and speaking. Or
Wednesday the 12th of October?
I'm sorry, Wednesday the 2nd of October.
Oh,
my
okay.
apologies. And seeing how your review and recommendation is treated by the City Commission.
Are you asking them to make a decision that night, or expecting them to?
They could do that. They could continue it. Might be wise to continue it, but that's completely up to them. We'll also be holding an organizing meeting, an educational meeting at the Armory this coming Sunday, the 29th of September, from 3 to 5, just so people can learn about the issue and what's going on. Finally, I have some follow-up from the concerns I've expressed about the ordinance before, about the language that was inserted that I believe would have negated our ability to have this application reviewed under the current ordinance. And it led me to make a Public Records Act request that I'm going to share with you all. The city recorder is actually asking me for $300 to fulfill my request. I'm not asking all of you guys to take part in my fight on that.
Is
but
that typical?
No. No, I've
already read it.
I've often made Public Records Act requests and had no fees asked of me.
And this is because, well, your bona fide neighborhood associations involved in this, right?
Well, this
Wouldn't they
is
make that
my
requirement?
request. It's not the neighborhood association's request, but I'll certainly ask the neighborhood association if they want to become involved with this.
Excuse me, Jim, I think I was thinking about something else. I hadn't quite caught up with what this
Sure.
was.
Public Records Act request that I made to the city for various sources of documentation and emails regarding how the language developed regarding the land use, the prohibition of these applications on properties that are subject to land use approvals. Pete, I've read your email. I want you to know right away that I don't have any concern with you or John Lewis. I think you guys have both been like completely straightforward, above board, and just stand-up guys. I do have some concerns about what happened here, and if there's nothing, that's fine, but release the information to let us all know. That's what I'm asking the city to do. The reason I'm bringing this to you all tonight is that in Nancy's request in response to me, there's something very interesting that I wanted to direct your guys' attention to, is that in the response she gave me, she says that there are documents from the city attorney that pertain to the review of this new ordinance. And my question is, because I've seen, I've been at these meetings, I've looked on the city's website as this ordinance has moved forward, and I've never seen a memo on the ordinance from the city attorney or anything else, and I wonder if the commission has. Like at your work session last October in 2012, did you ever get a summary memo of any kind from the city attorney? If you haven't, I think it's really important that for your next meeting, your next regular meeting, that this commission asks for all of the city attorney's advisory memos on this ordinance. It's perfectly fair if the city attorney has opined on this ordinance that you guys get to see it. I think that's something that you all should have and need to ask for as you consider and evaluate this ordinance. You should absolutely be privy to and have the ability to benefit from any detailed analysis that the city attorney's done on this ordinance. So those are my comments, and thank you for indulging me with some extra time.
Her letter, Nancy I's letter is written, maybe she does this, I don't know, very legal, extreme legalese, seems to me. Looking for
Well, I'm sure the city attorney is advising
Okay.
her on how to deny a public records request by demanding that someone pay an outrageous amount of money. And unfortunately, that was the standard operating procedure of the city in the past, and unfortunately, it hasn't changed.
Pete, do people typically have to pay this when they're asking? Do you know?
In most cases, we pay for copies or request fees for making copies for cover staff, or cover staff time beyond a half an that's kind of our policy.
Yeah.
When you fill out a form, they sign the thing on there, and it says, I agree to pay certain costs if they apply.
Out of curiosity, what if an advisory group to the city like us requests information of that sort? Will we also be told there was a charge, or would it be shared with us?
Well, I think it's less, everything has to be shared if it's public record. But the city is allowed to charge for the cost of making those records public because it's usually above and beyond what they normally do. And it requires paper and resources.
Well, I realize there are costs involved.
Yeah.
My question was relative to formally chartered city advisory groups. Is there precedent for charging them for information upon a request, or generally is that information
I think
shared?
that's generally shared in the form of staff reports that are covered under the fees of the committee's budget. Like, I think there's a committee budget that our department maintains for Planning Commission, Historic Review Board, and Natural Resources Committee. And to the extent that paper copies are made, that's really important. Electronic documents are obviously very easy to reproduce and send and those kinds of things. So that's kind of where the...
Her letter, I happen to like Nancy, but her letter, her citing the attorney's comments to her probably cost more than $300.
I haven't
Just
seen-
respond to this input.
And I have not seen any of this.
Yeah,
so.
you seen this?
I have not
Chairman,
seen.
Chairman, I would suggest we move on to our agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this stuff, though, Jim. Yes, sir.
Okay,
I agree.
so we have a letter from Shaw
Yep.
with a specific request and one question.
Yeah.
And, Mr. Chairman, I went through and I pulled up the section in our red line document where she asked for a change. On your red line document, what is that?
Well, don't look for it on the red line document.
It's there.
I mean, if it's in there.
It is
there. It's probably easier to find on the clean version.
Okay.
So,
Anyway, I found it, what she was talking about there. She's
So,
very
yeah.
definite.
It's on page 6 of the.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So
Yes,
she's
that's
talking about section 1208040,
Right.
capital D1, small b, Roman numeral 3.
And it seems to me the concern that she has is about whether the ordinance applies to the city as well as a private property owner. Is that what she's
So
doing?
let me read this real quick. Property owned. Private property. Oh, okay, so she's recommending that we insert the word private before the word property owner.
Okay. Why do you think, why do you think, what the intent is, what's the intent?
The property owner, or if a street tree, the abutting private property owner consents to the designation. So if there is a street tree or a tree growing in an alley, then the abutting private property owner who is responsible for the maintenance of that tree already under city code must consent to the designation and agree to sign a protective covenant.
Can you explain the intent as you see it?
Well, I think she's just trying to clarify that consent is from the abutting private property owner if it's a street tree, and if it is in a public property owned by a jurisdiction other than the city of Oregon City, such as Clackamas County
Okay.
or
Yeah.
some.
There's something wrong with that sentence, though. the property owner, or if a street tree abutting
Yeah, right.
something.
Well, sometimes I feel like a street tree.
Private property owner would help a little bit.
Yeah, so if we look at the site, the appropriate consent. I think we're really talking about the consent required depending on what the property type is.
Right, I think so too.
If the property is public, Oregon City public property, you
Right.
don't necessarily have to have a private covenant, or a covenant. You can probably do it just based on approval by the city commission.
Right, right.
By
That's
passage
what I
of the
read her
That's what I-
recommendation
her-
to essentially do,
Yeah.
Yeah, her
is to
idea-
make that distinction.
It's much better, her whole sentence, the way she wrote it, is much better than what's in the existing.
Or at least it makes it clear that
Right.
this only really applies
Right.
to other than city property.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think what we wanted to add into the new code was the designation. It could be a covenant or other instrument or agreement applicable to the specific site that legally protects the tree. So if a covenant is usually recorded against a private property. So I don't have any problem with the language at all.
So adopting her language, italics 3, italicized
Well,
3.
it doesn't change the intent
No,
at all, it
no.
just clarifies
I
it,
think
as
so.
I understand it.
Yeah.
Clarity is good.
Yeah, so, yeah.
So you add one word in, is that right?
Well,
No,
it's
we
actually
actually
had
have
the
the
first-
her whole sentence from her memo.
As well as one word. That whole sentence and that word private.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's
and
right.
I would suggest adding before abutting the, just for better English.
sure, okay.
Beyond this one comment, would it make sense just to go kind of way from front to back? I'm just.
Yeah, I think we were just gonna,
Yeah, no, I'm saying
Yeah.
beyond the.
Well, I'd sure like to take care of this, though, if we
Yeah.
can.
Well, yeah, it's in print here, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm saying after that.
So you're adding the THE?
Yeah.
Abutting, is that?
Correct. And that's a little bit better.
Yeah.
okay. See,
The other way we could go about this is ask if anyone has anything they would like to see done.
Well, I think the second issue she raised is a valid issue. If we could take care of her 2 points here,
Right, okay.
then we'd have this taken care of.
that's referring to the definition
Right.
section.
Right.
And that's at the end.
Yeah, at the end, definition on page 7 of the clean copy. The definitions are in a different part of the code.
Right.
Seven-
Scattered around.
1704, 1355, tree stand,
What
which
page are you on?
page, of the clean version,
Oh.
7 on the clean version, and on the red line version, we're looking at page 7 as well.
Yep.
Um,
And this is something we spend a lot of time on,
So, yeah,
you know. I don't know what the concern is unless she wants to.
Well, she's thinking
reduce
that,
the canopy.
well, it's the definition of what makes a stand of trees, it's a continuous group of trees. And we chose, at this, so far, we chose to define that as 80% coverage
Right.
of the area that is encompassed in growth.
Right.
And did we want it to apply whether it was 2 or more or 3 or more trees?
I would think, 2 or more, it doesn't really say, you know, it's not that.
The
big a
red
deal.
line version says 3 or more,
Yeah, the red line version.
who together constitute a, you know, I like the 80% because it's empirical. It's one thing that's empirical in this document on something that's nebulous that we were trying to figure out how to get through. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to
The
come.
only thing I could see to do is play with the 80%, put it down
Right.
to 75 or something like that, but 80 is actually a fairly good figure.
I agree with you.
I forget,
Yeah.
I believe that came from a scientific definition of stand of trees or forest or something like that.
Mhm.
But if it was less than 80%, it was a woodland, which is another entity. We tend to have forests here, not woodlands. 'Cause we
Yeah.
have, you know,
And
plus there are others that
by the
cover.
way, you and I, when we were looking at Waterford Park areas, not in the Waterford Park found an assemblage of scrub oak
Yes.
that together are, very, very tightly collected, which would meet this criteria. There's other places that we found a few individual trees, 3 or 4, that didn't quite touch their canopies.
Right.
And it wouldn't meet. So there's an empirical definition that helps us, I think.
Yeah, because, if we stick, when we can, to a scientific definition that,
Yeah.
that is used, by
Yeah.
other than us, that's a good thing. And I believe that's where this came from originally. This has been such a drawn-out process. I'm trying to remember, how did this get here?
I've never liked the 80%. I don't even know why it's in there, because, what if you have 3 or more trees and there isn't 80% coverage?
Well, then they're applied
Then
for
there's 3
individually.
trees,
Then there are 3 separate trees that are applied for separately. It's not that they can't be considered heritage trees.
Right, but why can't you consider it a stand without?
Well, let's say-
I just don't think that adds anything, and it makes it.
Well, on a bigger group of trees, it does. If it's only 3 trees, we assume that they're a group. But if they're separate trees, do they qualify as a stand, And, so.
Is your concern, Richard, that it might kick out areas that had value?
It could do that, yeah. It may
Okay.
make it more difficult to determine whether or not something really qualifies. In other words, is it 79% or is it 78% or is it?
Well,
If I look back at the criteria for designation of an individual tree,
Yes.
I think there's enough discretion, or at least enough, evaluate criteria that you could probably make those individual trees qualify.
Well, that was my understanding. We talked at one point about not even including the concept of a stand.
Yep.
Yeah, we did.
Simply designating one tree at a time.
We did that.
So I don't think there ever was a difficulty in doing it that way. I mean, this is just a different concept when there are several trees close together, and you gotta have some definition for what constitutes this group of trees.
I mean, if there's a stand.
That's it at the
If there's a
moment.
stand and there's one here and 20 feet, 40 feet away is the next one, and 100 feet is the next one, is that a stand? Well, it could be if they're significant, but, it's individuals, but then. Huh?
There has to be some outer limit of distance. I mean,
Well, yeah,
which-
that's right, that's what I'm thinking
Yeah.
too. I mean, you couldn't just say, well, 3 trees wherever they are, if I like those 3 trees, they're a stand.
Yeah.
Somehow that doesn't work.
Yeah, originally, in the previous edition of this, it said 20 feet apart. If they were more, and that's completely unworkable, because not even in native forest are they that thick. I actually went and measured them in a mature forest near here in West Lynn, and they varied from, right next to each other to 55 feet apart with an average of 24.99 feet.
Check that out.
Yeah, so,
But if you look at the tree heritage, or stand definition, heritage tree means a tree that has been designated by the city as having unique importance and subject to the heritage tree regs. And I don't see why the coverage should be a criterion for that.
well, we're trying to
Well, it's only a criterion for stand, not
Yeah.
for heritage tree.
Yeah, but why does it have to be for stand, though? If you've got a bunch of trees out there that have some kind of significance, why should the coverage?
Well, I think it'd be hard
kind of a
for,
second part
we're
of it?
having difficulty. Think of this from a neighborhood association member who wants to see this nice grove of whatever they are, protected on the bluff, someplace. And if we can't figure out how to measure it, how could he or she? I mean, if they're 100 feet apart, are they still stand? I don't think they are. Do you then nominate each one as individually significant? That isn't exactly easy.
well,
It could be done. but-
well, there isn't very many properties where the trees are going to be widely scattered. If they're on separate properties, they have to be applied for separately. Yeah, because it's property specific. And if there's only 2 trees on a property, nominate them individually. But if it is a larger piece, it's basically in parks and larger spots where you're going to come across big pieces like this. There could be private property.
And this ordinance does not prohibit anyone from nominating assemblages or individuals on public property.
Right.
We
No.
made sure it did not.
No.
That was still allowed. So that's where these larger distance issues might become.
This
I
is
just-
almost like a first cut kind of a thing, provide some guidance on
Yeah.
how to turn your application in.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, I think it's kind of back to the whole concept of, should you even include the idea of a stand here? And if we really have no idea what a stand is, we shouldn't even use it in this regulation. And you should just be back to individual heritage trees. But if we've got some concept of what we think a stand is, well, then we should write it down. I think we did once.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, I believe I looked up the scientific definition of a forest, and it was 80% coverage. They defined it by coverage. So it's an established way of doing things. And if we have an open savanna-like stand, which did exist in Oregon because of Aboriginal burning, then you've got individual trees, or ones that are close together but not a solid canopy. And the scientists chose 80%, and they're applying this throughout the world. And that's how this got here, is that I pulled it out of, some actual literature from scientific sources of how to define what's a forest, what's a woodland, what's a savanna, and so on. And
I think that, I believe that there's at least two of us, Sean and I, who feel real strongly about stands. And I think more of us feel strongly about trying to include that element if we can, for assemblages. If we drop assemblages out of everything we've done this far, we're really changing the character of this document.
Well, I don't-
We stood fast.
No, I'm not suggesting that.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting that, and I have from the first, I think, that I don't see the significance of the 80%.
Okay. So do you feel it would work without the 80%?
I think it would work without the 80%.
How do you feel?
It gives you more flexibility.
well, it would be more flexibility, but it's, you have to think of woods you know of. Most of them are close to 100% in our area, because with the exception of oak, scablands, which, that would be the main area where you might consider having a wider spacing and more open space. But other than that, in a naturally forested area, which is what we've been talking about for Grove so far, you're going to have closer to
The intent of
100%.
this committee is to keep the assemblage idea alive. I don't care what we do to keep it alive,
Yeah.
personally. And if it make you feel better, the percentage thing is not critical to me. If the intent is that, or the result would be that we would get rid of assemblages because of our actions here, I don't want to see that happen.
No, that's
no.
not the suggestion.
Yeah. Well,
But that's exactly where I have a problem. I mean, I don't want to get rid of assemblages either, but I'm troubled by the idea that we couldn't describe what one is. I mean, how do we tell people they should designate heritage tree stands, but we have no idea what one is?
I know, I agree with you.
That doesn't
That's a
work.
good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, we need some sort of definition.
Back to partly, it's, there's the definition, and then there's also the nomination submittal requirement, where if you nominate an individual tree, we want to know its diameter, its species, how tall it is, and what its health is, and maybe some other information. Obviously, how it meets the heritage criteria and other things. If it's a nomination for a stand of trees, we only say that the nomination shall be accompanied by sufficient information, such as a stand health report that describes the overall condition of the stand. But that you may request further information to support the nomination request.
But if you look over under criteria for designation, page 5 of 8, and, it talks about stand of trees. Each one.
Every one of those.
Yeah.
Is that bad?
No, it's
No,
good.
it's good.
No, we need it
The
there.
80% has no significance.
Okay, good, good. Okay, I was hoping that.
Because that's where the criteria.
Right, right, I
Where's the
agree.
80%?
Yeah, right.
And so to me, it just doesn't have,
Right. I don't know, we worked so hard on this land as it is, and that's just something terribly wrong about this document, because of all the work you put in too, Pete. We should send this on to the powers that be to see how it works with that. If they don't like it, then.
Maybe
Right,
there's-
right, you had to tweak the 80% somehow.
What would you say if the canopy was predominantly covered? Because, I mean, obviously 80% is more than 50%. Maybe you said it was, primarily intact or whatever, kind of indicating it's over 50%. They give some wiggle room for some, scabland oaks or whatever. And if it's less than 50%, I'm trying to get more wiggle room for stuff, but still, if it's more than 50%, then that would cover almost every situation, wouldn't it, for a stand?
Well, it's not going to look much like a stand at 50% even,
But I guess like some of the oak savannas
Well,
and stuff
yeah.
like that,
Well,
I'm just asking, what percent would
yeah,
oak savanna be?
They can be anywhere from widely scattered trees to close to full cover and still qualify as savanna. But they have to be, I think, trying to remember what the definition for savanna was, but it was fairly low, probably closer to 50%.
I was just trying to give kind of at least a broad number that could cover most of the situations,
Well,
but not tie us.
Yeah,
With some of us
there
saying
isn't very many scabland oaks other than the Public Works property near Waterboard Park that has a little bit of it where the trees are somewhat more scattered, but even there's a continuous cover in spots. So,
I'll make one more attempt at this.
okay.
And whatever, we all want to do, I guess, but on the criteria, if you look at the criteria, it's on page 5 of 8, the heritage criteria, just pick number 1, or little I. The tree or stand is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad pattern of Oregon city history. I'm just picking that one.
Okay.
This is the first one.
Yep.
And is it possible that there is something out there that doesn't have 80% coverage that that fits? And I'm saying the 80% to me has nothing to do with how we designate these. If you look at the criteria.
Where they hung the Whitman massacre Indians.
Yeah.
Would be such a place.
Yeah,
If you know where it is, tell me,
yeah.
because nobody sees it.
were they hung or were they buried?
Well, I think you get it either.
First
way.
hung, then they're buried.
Oh, okay.
I think you're gonna get it in the door.
Yeah.
The definition.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too.
I guess I'm not understanding what the problem is. I'm accepting that 80% has some basis. I'm not troubled by a different percentage if we had a reason for a different percentage, but I don't see where we've heard anything by defining what a stand is. Because if a group of trees don't qualify as a stand, meet the other criteria, they qualify as individual heritage trees.
We've
Indeed.
gone over and over this, but, a stand is more than 2 or 3, however we decide to do it.
It says
To
two.
me, that's what it means.
It says 3 in one place and 2 in another.
If it meant 1.5 mile that way and 1.5 mile that way and 1.5 mile that way, it's not a stand to me.
No.
Is it?
Well,
this is kind of a common sense thing. That is.
There's some
Yeah.
kind of proximity between the trees.
Yeah,
I don't believe that.
they have to look like they belong together as a group.
I think this ordinance is already.
However you define that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this ordinance is already better than other cities. Lake Oswego does not address stands. Is that not true? You did the research.
It may, I haven't looked at it recently.
Okay, well, I think we debated and we worked and we tried to resolve this, and we've got a good stab at something that will get people's attention if they want to have assemblages protected.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
whatever.
I don't object to, us being together to, move that forward with that, but I don't think it adds anything. That's what I'm trying to
Okay.
say.
Got
The
it.
overall thing, to me,
Got it.
it doesn't add anything.
I know.
Okay.
Okay. So you're okay if we proceeded then?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, that takes care of Shaw's email.
Okay.
So we can go back and start at the beginning, right?
Okay, we ever,
Do we need to?
We don't need to.
okay, how many,
order to this? was,
How many have a comment that might lead to a change?
I actually, I request kind of clarification.
Okay.
Maybe. Getting back to the criteria for designations, maybe I was nodding off or something, but number 3, the tree represents a significant or distinguishable entity within the city. I just have trouble with that word entity. I mean, we talked already about historical, and I'm just, you know.
Well, I
trying
think
to-
what it means is that it's a strong enough of an entity that it makes an impression on people, or, you know, it's a big tree, or it's just a word, and it,
Yeah, but I guess I almost.
you don't like the word entity, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think in usual lay conversations or trying to explain a neighborhood association. People will be walking around,
You like it.
you know, pointing out that
You like-
that's an entity or something like that. You know, it seems a little bit
Would you
strange.
rather call it value?
So it's maybe
This is where you're
distinguishable.
really, I think, talking about this, the shared impression
Right.
that it has.
Right.
In that regard, and my caution would be, yeah, go ahead and change it, but you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here, because if you make it too scientific,
Right.
then you may lose some of that.
And my whole goal isn't making it more scientific. Mine's more kind of just a lay language. I'm not
More
sure.
common
Well,
language.
yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe other folks use entity
most people
in
would
everyday
refer to a tree as an
conversation.
entity.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I don't know, I just flash back to Star Trek or
Well,
something.
I like the number 3 existing, because there's other things that I've been advocating for that have to do with assemblages and trees that have rot in them that some of you want to talk about, some of you don't want me to talk about, but they all contribute to the value of that.
I don't think anybody's troubled by the concept.
Yeah.
We're just talking about the words.
Well, and so that's why I'm wondering whether value is a better word.
Well, or here's a different one, a significant and distinguishable presence. That's the same concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good word.
Versus ghost trees. No ghost trees, real trees, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And when I think of trees, that entity, my friends gonna start talking to me or something like that.
So,
All right.
Presence,
I like that.
So
You good with that?
Are we in agreement that presence would work instead?
I'm comfortable with that. I appreciate it.
Any objections? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what does it mean though?
About as much as empty. About as much as.
I mean, it really is kind of a theoretical concept. It just means, you know, there it is and you notice it, you know?
I think
Well, yeah, wow, you know, that's
the
actually.
difference between a presence and
Well,
an
that's,
entity.
you know, that's really what we're
personality.
looking for is
Yeah.
presence, you know.
But does that mean, so what does it mean exactly then?
Well, it means entity.
You notice it, I think what it really means, I mean, or what you're trying to say.
Well, yeah, it's like, you know, you've got a 8-foot thick ponderosa pine, like we have, I think it's about that big, but, you know, it has a presence.
Well, I like the word presence.
Yeah.
Over entity, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good
But
myself.
what's significant?
well, that's what the committee decided.
It's kind of the eye of the beholder.
Well, let's
We have a
see.
test here or something?
But it's not too scientific, it's kind of quasi-nebulous, which is good. Well, but it's quick, wiggle room you're talking about?
I think significance has to do with it fell down what everybody noticed.
Significance is what the committee, you know, makes your final vote on, really.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, significant is just, it's not a windy little tree, so what it means, that's what it means.
That was my only.
Okay, so you're good. Do you have any changes you'd like to see?
I want to adopt a section related to mitigation from unforeseen natural disasters. The Tunguska effect, when the asteroid comes through and blows up over the city, what do we do to mitigate the loss of everything?
Which one are you looking at?
This is a joke.
Oh,
Okay.
He was looking
I was thinking about that. When the asteroid blows up at altitude and levels everything around us, what do you do to mitigate the effect? We got to have a part in it, I think. Okay, I'm done. I'm done.
Okay,
I'm not sure.
In Sacramento when it happens, then they come back and they gotta deal with it.
Sacramento won't be there yet.
yeah, you'll be the only board member left. You're gonna have to do everything. So, okay. Anybody else have?
I know.
Okay, I do have one on the very last page. Our definition of native trees and,
Okay, let's take it.
yeah, all the way at the end.
Yeah.
It's on the color copy?
8A. I'm not looking at the colored ones.
Oh, I see, it's on there.
Yeah.
Page 8.
All right, so in our list of native trees, it includes non-native trees. We don't have birch trees here, native. Sequoia and redwoods are from southern Oregon and California. So, and I've been meaning to say something about this, and I keep forgetting it.
Other native trees?
Under native tree,
Right.
our native tree stands refers to a regulated native tree, blah, 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 and then includes Douglas fir, which is native, cedar, which western red cedar is native, redwood is from California,
Well,
sequoia is from,
Oregon.
yeah,
Okay.
it's not native though, it doesn't grow here naturally.
Sequoia sempervirens grows on the Oregon coast. Port Orford.
Yeah, Port Orford
This is
South.
an old.
Okay, I'm just talking.
Yeah, and then birch, the only birch native to Oregon are shrubs.
Well, they're all, yeah.
But up in Seattle, there's native ones. But, you know, that's
Yeah.
further away than we should be including these. I mean, they're wonderful trees and should be planted and all that, but,
But you would this be inclusive if you got rid of sequoia? And birch?
you might want to say, there's hemlocks that aren't mentioned,
No.
there's a bunch of trees that aren't mentioned.
Absolutely.
And this isn't where we should be listing them all. We can say,
You're right.
So why don't we
include
say-
among others
Refer-
might be what we need to do and take out the 3 non-natives.
Why don't you just stop at the area with a period?
Right, is there a master list of kind of like
Yeah,
native
so I think we're
trees?
just
just to
need a free
reference?
list.
Well-
This is graphic reading.
I would recommend we refer to the one or two native lists that we're comfortable with.
Yeah, which would be the Portland list and,
Okay, and then not call them out by name.
right, that would be fine.
Yeah.
Because there's, you know, you start listing trees and it's going to go on for a while.
You'll forget one.
So we're stopping the sentence?
Yeah, let's-
Is that
yeah.
right? And deleting the species, the names?
Yeah.
Okay.
And inserting a reference
Oh, yeah, and then this,
to the list of native trees.
yeah, so that they can refer to that. Then this other thing, significant native trees are typically suitable for retention next to streets, and that's not true.
Where's
Yeah,
that?
I
Where's
think
that?
that's where your definition gets into regulation, and the definitions really should just mob out defining things.
Right, and that shouldn't be in there, because it's not true that they're suitable for retention next to streets. They're going to tear the streets up,
Yeah.
like cottonwood and maple and so on.
You're
And it's not
proposing,
part of the definition of a native tree.
Anyway, no, it should just go.
you're proposing removing?
Yeah, that whole thing.
Okay. I agree.
Okay, and then the next one, there's it says, ornamental trees are ones that originated as nursery stock as opposed to native trees that originated at the site prior to development. So that means that any native trees planted there as part of development aren't native, which is an oxymoron.
But you're the one that proposed this.
Well, I may be, I don't remember.
You're the one that were the ones.
Well, actually, this
Well, I think this came in.
This was from the previous, it's not in the heritage thing itself, it's in the definition elsewhere in city
It
code.
was,
Yeah, that was already there.
It was cut and pasted in from somewhere else.
So what are you proposing?
Well, let's see.
I mean, if we feel we need a good definition for an ornamental tree, what,
I would just say any non-native tree that originated as nursery stock, and take out the as opposed to native trees, because they've already been defined. They don't need to be in here.
The phrase about tree removal. has
Yeah, you better get rid of that. Means that
Or-
for the purposes of tree removal, whatever we got a tree ordinance for.
Yeah, that was,
whereabouts?
oh, that's right on,
Tree means
First
for
sentence.
purposes of tree removal.
Yeah, it was listed for something else.
yeah, it was copied in again, and that should be pulled out too, for,
Redo it.
Is it necessary to say originated as nursery stock?
I was gonna ask that, is
Ornamental.
that always true? I mean.
It is always true, as
when
far,
you
well,
follow-
actually.
You go someplace else, dig up trees out of a forest, put them in a wagon, bring them here and plant them.
Well, that's true, and there's also trees that come up, the jays plant red oaks, the jays plant red oaks in my yard all the time, and they're getting to be so many of them, we're ripping them out, but they're not native and they weren't nursery stock. So originated as nursery stock probably could go.
Shoot for Jays.
Okay, so how's that gonna be changed?
Well, that's a good question, let's think this through.
Yeah, we kind of threw out all of the words.
Actually, it's, usually it's people say non-native ornamentals, that may or may, let's see, there's not much left in this particular,
Is there an ornamental tree list by the city?
There's
No.
Native and a nuisance list.
yeah, and there's a lot of trees that are on neither.
So is it a planted tree? Is it a tree that's been planted?
Well, it's any
Well,
non-native tree introduced or propagated for use in a new region.
Do we really need this definition?
well, we need some,
Not for the heritage tree ordinances.
if the only reason for it at all is to differentiate it from native, but I think that is done by defining native. So do we need it? That's a good point. Because once you take out everything that's wrong in here, there's nothing left.
Well,
When
any
in doubt,
non-native
cut.
tree introduced,
It really
Or
is
propagated.
unnecessary. I mean, we don't use it anywhere else in the code, the definition of an ornamental.
well, I think you did for the purposes of removal. That's why you have it in there.
Yeah, I mean, but the only
Where is it?
But
It's only in this definition.
Right, I know that, but I think the reason it's in there is you talk about removing non-native trees, so, no?
Well,
This ordinance.
when you look elsewhere in the code under
Yes.
removal of trees, you
Yes.
don't talk about ornamental trees, you only talk about size of tree.
Oh,
And whether that
Right.
tree is in a construction area or
Okay.
outside of it, or a street.
yeah, or if it's got disease and all that stuff, yeah.
yeah.
So,
If it's not needed, we should,
Why,
we can do without it.
I'd say take it out.
yeah, I would say,
All right, good.
That's fine.
Good comment, yeah.
okay. Yeah,
I love that.
all right. Is there anything else at this point?
No, we're on
Anybody?
schedule.
I'm good to go on it myself. I don't,
Me
I,
too.
Did
you
we
know,
talk about the 80%?
we did.
We took care
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Okay, well,
All right.
do we have a motion to approve this and send it on to the council?
I move
Yeah,
that we
okay.
advance this to the adoption level at our next meeting.
Okay. Okay, it's been moved by Jerry and seconded by Richard that we go ahead and send this on as amended to the city council. So,
But we have to do the formal vote at the next regular meeting.
that's right, we do.
That's
You're right.
good.
You're
But we
right.
still need, we were voting tonight to advance it to the formal vote
With the changes that we
with the
Yeah,
changes.
so Pete, you'll send out all the changes to everybody before the regular meeting?
We didn't vote.
Yeah, we haven't voted yet. So
Well, before we have a discussion now?
Yes.
Okay. Can we vote on this?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask.
To advance it with these changes to a
To what?
formal.
Well, I
formal
didn't
adoption.
think we could take any votes at all in the work
Oh.
sessions. I'm just,
Yeah, what is a,
I think you can formally vote during the work session.
We're only
Okay.
advancing it to ourselves anyway.
that's true.
Yeah, well, I don't think we need a motion to do that, do we?
Probably not. Okay.
No, I'm.
Well, now that we've done it,
Since we're in the
Okay.
discussion phase.
so I think we've done it.
I'd like to thank you all for the hard work you've done. I think
Well,
it's
thank you
a
for
good document.
dealing with all the changes.
I think it's going to be a much clearer process for all parties involved.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Now, you can't leave tonight without helping me find a few more people to fill out this trip. And you're all invited on the trip. Richard is bringing several people. Ryan's got his whole neighborhood association. cats and dogs.
Bring my dogs.
Yeah, it's a huge thing.
And if you can join us, I'd like each one of you as members to be prepared to make a few comments about things as we go along, because we have several presenters that will be talking, but there's other things that we see things that are important to us, like Richard, I'd like to have you, we're gonna go next to the Cove. The Cove developers will be with us that day, one or two of them. And we're gonna pull off the side by the Cove, and I'd like to have you be prepared to comment a little bit on all the things we did, you and Brian, to make that a better project. And Brian got assurances this week from Randy and Ed that the changes that he'd asked and we'd asked for from Fish and Wildlife are still in their planning to make happen.
Yeah,
That's significant.
That means a lot more native planting than normal.
It also means more
With,
retention of the
Oregon white oak instead of ornamental trees and
Right.
so on.
Did you get the sense they were still interested in saving groves and trees if they could?
Yeah, that's the same plan, they said.
Okay.
They said it's the same plan, they haven't changed it.
So what you just said, what you just said would be nice to say with us.
Mhm.
Okay, and then, Fred, if you had something to say in general about any of these things we've been looking at. We're gonna look at assemblages of trees, individual trees, and then vast vistas. We're gonna have a person on board who's gonna tell the story of working with Tom McCall personally. We're gonna meet Robert Moore from Westland, who founded Lynn City in character. And if the mayor will help us, Doug, he's supposed to play John McLaughlin. We'll say hello to John McLaughlin briefly too. So let's make kind of fun, living history, experiential learning in the field, you know. And we got about 24 people signed up right now. I need more. I want to fill this bus up.
So I'm going to notify the school district and get a few people involved there. hopefully.
Right.
We'll keep sending the word out right up until then.
Yeah, so
I
nice
need-
turd bus, air conditioned,
But-
good PA system. I've used it before with this company, and they do good work with their equipment, so. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, Pete. You want to help put these things away?
No, I'll be happy to do